My name is Jeremy Lee, and I will be your next speaker. Are we all set? Fantastic. To kilt or not to kilt? That is the question. Yes, you heard me right. I said kilt, the legendary garment of the Scottish Highlands, the often contentious and provoking article of clothing, the kilt. For many years, men wore kilts in peace. Yet, in this day and age, the sight of a kilt sparks outrage and controversy. Perhaps it's the fear of public indecency, or the terror of the wild Highlander. At any rate, kilts are uncommon, and that is why I am on a mission to raise awareness for this important cause. Today, I would like to give you 3 reasons why you should wear a kilt. But first, a brief history of this legendary garment. Disclaimer. If you are a woman, chances are you wear skirts on occasion. In that case, you wearing a kilt would not be the most spectacular event in world history. However, I hope that at the end of my speech, you will be convinced that you need to buy kilts for your husbands, brothers, fathers, sons, boyfriends, and other male figures in your life. Also, you might be thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, I'm not Scottish. Why should I wear a kilt? Let me ask you this. Are you Chinese? According to an article published by Science News, the first pants were invented by Chinese herdsmen around 3,000 years ago. And yet, I have never heard anyone once argue about their ethnic eligibility to wear pants. The origins of the Scottish kilt are, well, shrouded in mystery. What originally possessed the wild Highlander to wrap himself in a length of woolen cloth remains unknown. Yet, historical records indicate that the kilt originated around the 16th century. It all began with the great kilt. I must make a clarification. While all kilts are great, the great in great kilt refers to the fact the piece of material was quite large. The great kilt was a rectangular piece of tartan cloth roughly 4 to 5 yards long and about 2 yards wide. This was pleated along the length and belted around the waist to form the great kilt. Now, you're probably wondering, what tartan cloth? What's that? Well, I'm glad you asked. The word tartan refers to a color scheme with a solid background and overlapping lines of color at right angle to each other's. We Americans have a peculiar habit of misnaming things, so we call this pattern plaid. Interesting thing about the word plaid, or plaid as the Scots say, it actually refers to the piece of cloth that the kilt is made out of. That is one of the reasons why the great kilt is often called the belted plaid. Now, the great kilt was a very practical garment to the Highlander. When he was cold, he could use the excess as a cloak to wrap himself. At night, he could use it as a blanket. It was generally earth tone to provide him with camouflage. You're probably thinking, hold on a minute, earth tone kilts? I thought they were all brightly colored tartans. And you'd be correct about modern kilts. In those days, bright dyes were a little harder to come by and perhaps a wee bit impractical. Let me give you a scenario. You're running through the heather and bracken, fleeing your enemies, the neighboring clan. You found yourself a small dell in which to hide yourself, and you're wrapping yourself in the folds of your kilt to hide your shape, when all of a sudden, you're surrounded by the blades of your enemy. Perhaps canary yellow was not the wisest choice of kilt color. At any rate, as history rolled on, so did the kilt. One of the greatest innovations in kilt history was the invention of the filabeg, or little kilt. This happened when the top half of the great kilt was chopped off and the pleats were sewn in to give us, in a sense, the modern kilt. This was made from the same wool, from the same sheep, in the same mills as the great kilt. However, the difference between this and the great kilt is probably if you got a little bigger in the belly, you'd have to get a new kilt. Other developments include the development of the utility kilt, interestingly enough, by an American. Stephen Villegas, the founder of the company Utilikilt, first came up with the idea of working on hot construction sites in Spain. In an interview with CNN, he says, quote, "I liked the idea of the traditionally Scottish kilt, but I wasn't Scottish, so I got around to saying I wanted something that's like the Scottish kilt, just with pockets, belt loops, and it was washable," end quote. So he took an old pair of army fatigues, added fabric to make the pleats, and thus was born the utility kilt. These have pockets, belt loops, buckles, and snaps. Lots of snaps. And they also come in solid colors for those of you who prefer not to wear a tartan kilt every day of the week. Now, there's one question I know you're probably all wondering. It's the question most common to all kilt wearers, and that is what is worn under the kilt. Let me explain the history of this. The traditional mode is sans undergarments because at the time the Royal Highland units were incorporated into His Majesty's Imperial Army, the long johns issued to troops extended well below the calf, and as it would be unseemly for His Majesty's Royal Highlanders to be marching around in their underpants, they weren't given any. And that is why this wardrobe omission is called regimental. However, nowadays, it's completely personal preference. So there you have it. A brief history of the kilt, but why should you wear a kilt? Now, the first reason is function. Kilts are by far more functional than pants in 3 ways. The first is comfort. I'll come clean. I own 4 kilts, 3 tartan and 1 utility kilt. And in a race between jeans and a kilt, the kilt wins any day in comfort. But they're also more practical. Because of their construction, kilts have none of the same stress points as pants, which means they're naturally much longer lived. I generally wear through a pair of jeans in about a year. I've heard of people wearing the same kilt regularly for over 10 years. Think about how much money you would have saved by not buying that many pairs of pants. But kilts are also much more versatile. I could wear the same kilt to a wedding in the morning, a picnic at noon, a hike in the afternoon, and the pub in the evening. Well, not me at the pub. I'm not 21. But you get the gist of the idea. Now, the second reason why you should wear a kilt is to make a statement. This statement is more than just a fashion statement, although it is a very good fashion statement at that. This statement is a political statement. And no, it's not one of those gender bender statements. The kilt has a long history in the world of politics. It all began back in 1745 with the final great Jacobite rising. Now, the Jacobite rebellions were a series of military campaigns in Scotland to try and overthrow the oppressive House of Hanover and restore a Stuart king to the throne. Ultimately unsuccessful, the results were catastrophic. In 1746, the Crown outlawed the wearing of kilts, the playing of bagpipes, the use of tartan cloth, and other weapons of war. The punishment, in accordance with the Dress Act of 1746, was, quote, imprisonment in any of His Majesty's prisons during the space of 6 months, and upon second offense, transportation to any of His Majesty's plantations across the seas for the time of 7 years, end quote. You see, the kilt was no longer just a garment. It was a statement. It was a statement of resistance to oppression, the resistance to tyranny. It was a symbol of a national identity. And there's your second reason to wear a kilt, to make a political statement of resistance to oppression. Now, the third reason why you should wear a kilt is that kilts will make you a much more considerate person. Now, I believe that the relegation of men to bifurcated garments has caused a rift between men and women. When you wear a kilt, you will understand the struggles that women who wear skirts deal with. Strong winds and leaf blowers will come to the forefront of your mind. The manner in which you sit down will dictate your level of modesty, and yes, I'm afraid handstands are no longer a socially acceptable form of exercise. And all in all, kilts will just make you a much more considerate person. So, there you have it. For many years, the oppressors of the kilt have tried to stomp out the kilted, yet we have remained strong. I have told you a little bit about the history of this legendary garment. I've given you 3 reasons why you should wear a kilt. You should wear a kilt because it is more practical than a pair of pants. You are making a statement of resistance to oppression, and it'll make you a better person. Now, I'd like to leave you with a verse from one of my favorite Scottish songs, and that is, Donald, where's your trousers? To wear the kilt is my delight, 'tis not wrong, I know it's right. The Highlanders would get a fright if they saw me in my trousers. Let the wind blow high, let the wind blow low, through the streets in my kilt I go. Oh, the lassies say hello, Donald, where's your trousers?